deadly shooting at an elementary school in Newtown, Connecticut. That's about 24 miles northwest of New Haven.
We're getting new details on the breaking news, moment-by-moment developments in what will go down as the worst mass shooting in American history.
And we're looking at video now from inside that theater. It appears to be chaotic. You can hear some of that background noise. You can kind of see people scurrying out of the theater. We don't know exactly when this was taken in relation to what happened in theaters 8 and 9 there at the Century 16 movie theater, but you can get a visual sense now of the chaos that was happening inside that theater moments after this lone gunman opened fire.
Across Chicago, 9 people were killed between Friday and Sunday, and 2 more were gunned down just hours ago, a murder rate of 2 a day. The violence increasingly claims innocent bystanders, like the pregnant 17-year-old girl wounded by a stray bullet through her living room window on Saturday.
A lot of people, you know, they want to be revolutionaries. Words are spells. Words are incantations, you know? Spelling. The root word of revolution is revolve. Going around the same thing over and over again. We're not revolving. We're going to find a solution, we're going to apply it, and we're going to move forward. We never want to have this discussion again.
If some of those great people that were in that club that night had guns strapped to their waist or strapped to their ankle.
Republicans are just about as phony as anyone could be. All they care about is taking care of the NRA.
And yet we want to be calling for more laws. You know, that's for members of Congress to feel useful. Quite frankly, that's not what we need to do.
More guns make us less safe, not more safe.
Gun crime, murder went down after states passed concealed carry laws.
And after the attacks in Orlando, Florida, I thought maybe the government might do their job and pass any kind of law, even a fig leaf, to justify their existence.
My name is Edgar Antillon. I wasn't supposed to be a filmmaker. One could say I was forced into it. Now, before I go any further, I need you to understand this film isn't about pushing an agenda. This isn't pro-gun, it isn't anti-gun. In 2010, I helped start what would become one of the largest handgun training companies and activist groups in Colorado, instructing over 10,000 students in 4 years alone. In that same amount of time, we sat around our TVs as news broke of a mass shooting in a movie theater, later at an elementary school, then a nightclub, and many more in between.
And by the way, it happens on the streets of Chicago every day.
And that's just it. It happens on the streets every day, but that's often not talked about. I'm not going to bore you with statistics. Pundits and politicians have done that after every shooting already. Instead, what I want to do is talk about the real issues surrounding gun violence and highlight what some would say are solutions to that violence.
You see, this be Chirac, the city of no brotherly love, where you a lame if you don't drink alcohol or smoke drugs. Here in Chirac, even the fortunate not so fortunate, because they point fingers at you if you ain't wearing true religion jeans or rocking the ladies' Jordans. But you know what? To some of us, there's some things that's a little bit more important, like keeping the roof over our heads and saying our daily prayers that our babies don't end up dead. See, our park districts are worn down, no after-school activities, television shows are shaping our realities, and we're being educated poorly. You think because the word charter funded to receiving royalty? Walmart controls the audit books for these schools. So according to the Walton family, they decide which money goes to who. You see, this be deeper than closing schools, they trying to close you. And as long as we continue to hate each other and kill one another, we doing exactly what they want us to do. And I'm ready to walk around Chirac with my own camera crew, asking questions and getting people's point of view. Like, my brother, why you choose the game, man? Do you even know what love is? It's a jungle on the streets and zoos inside the crib, because we are a product of how we live. Man, these shorties out here living wild. In Chirac, it's hard to be a grown-up, but even harder to be a child. That should make you go, wow. You see, something has to be done, like right now. And I don't mean no disrespect, but Jesse, he ain't getting it. His rainbow been pushing for over 20 years and his own son got convicted. But y'all ain't listening. See, these old heads be comfortable in their nice home with their feet kicked up collecting their pensions. How do we remove the tension? They marches ain't working, and we can forget signing a petition. It's time we strategize on how to get these young folks to listen, convert their intentions, spread more love, and stop all the senseless killings. Blacks kill more blacks than the KKK. Blacks kill more blacks than the KKK. If Emmett Till had survived, what would that young man have to say today? Being that he was from Chicago anyway. See, our grocery stores are poisonous. The prisons are packed like slave ships. Put your fist in the air for Laquan McDonald and all the victims of the Chicago Police Department. See, we all living heartless, scrapping over meat like animals because we jobless. Yo, it's time we bring an end to this here Chirac and bring that old sweet home Chicago back.
The resources are limited.
It's a socio-economic issue.
Definitely a lack of resources.
Poverty.
Poverty.
Poverty. Poverty.
Poverty. Poverty is the word I heard the most. Gun violence has persisted in some neighborhoods and communities for decades. These areas usually share common themes. However, poverty was the theme they shared the most. But more on that later. You don't necessarily agree that laws prevent gun violence.
If that was the case, Chicago would be the safest place on earth. It's not working. Like, we got to stop pretending. And people from the hood see it's not working. They just feel hamstringed because of the fact that they think they still have the mentality that if I get the firearm, I'm the bad person. And that's not true.
I'm sorry, let me address that. Okay. You know, when I hear this about, well, they have a terrible problem in Chicago, what I say to people is, have you ever driven across a state line? Well, yes, many times. Did anybody check you for a gun? Well, it's as easy to take a gun across a state boundary as it is your car. The guns that are used in Chicago and New York and places that have stricter laws are coming from out of state in most cases. The studies have shown that. They're gun runners. They're people who are making a living. You know, they're selling guns, and they're getting them in states that have weak gun laws. I mean, that's the problem. You can have strict gun laws in Chicago and New York, but it's easy to break that if you get them supplied from another state. So that's why we believe you should have strong nationwide gun laws. That's why you don't have a terrible problem with gun violence in Hawaii. They have strong gun laws, and they're an island.
Take the gun away from violence.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think if somebody is violent in nature, it doesn't matter what the tool is, that murder will still happen, regardless of the gun?
I mean, you can't say absolutes and stuff, but I mean, there are certain people that have no business owning guns. Yeah. There are certain personalities and temperaments that have no business owning guns. I'm a little bit different, and as a firearms instructor, you know, I believe that, you know, we have the right to keep and bear arms as per our Constitution. I don't technically believe that if you carry it outside of your home that you automatically are able to without some kind of level of competency. I'm a little bit, you know, different in that. I think that if you're going to carry it next to me and my family, you got to be able to show at least a minimum amount of competency as someone would show to drive a car, you know? But again, and who makes the rules and who makes the standards? We get into that kind of catch-22 conversation as well. But so violent people are violent, you know, and, you know, I hate, it frustrates me when people make attributions to inanimate objects, you know, gun violence. They don't say knife violence, car violence. It's violence. He just happened to be using a gun, you know. The question really isn't, you know, what legislation can we offer to reduce crime or to reduce this violence? It's A, how did the individual that maybe had no possible way or no real reason to get a gun, how did he or she get a gun?
And I wanted to let him know that I'm licensed to carry and I have a firearm on me. So I said, I just want to let you know I'm licensed to carry and I have a firearm on me. And he was stunned. He was like, what? So I repeated myself and I said, I have a license to carry and I have my firearm on me. He said, where is it? I said, it's right here in my pocketbook, and I went to grab my purse and give it to him. He's like, no, don't touch, put it down, like pulled out on me, and then took my purse, took it out of the front window, and then pulled everything out in the car. From there on, he told me to get out the car, and he arrested me. I asked him why was he arrested me, and he said because I was traveling with my firearm. The way I was traveling with my firearm wasn't the way I was supposed to be traveling with it. I said, well, how am I supposed to travel with it? And he said, I don't know exactly, but I know you're not supposed to travel with it the way that you have it just in your purse. So I started crying, and they arrested me for 48 days in state prison. After me being locked up for 48 days, my bail was $50,000. My minimum was 3.5 years. Maximum was 11.5 years. I wouldn't take a deal, so it would have been 11.5 years if I went to trial. I sat my 48 days in jail, and when I got out, I went public and wanted my story to be heard. Let someone tell me, to make sense of what just happened to me. I purchased a firearm to protect me and my kids because I got robbed, and I ended up in jail for 48 days. And the way that the law screwed up my life was that it basically said that all this hard work that I did, not getting arrested a day of my life, not doing anything bad, not selling no drugs, me going to get my license to carry the right way, the way you're supposed to, having it in a holster the right way, having it locked, and basically that law said, well, to me, it meant that I couldn't go anywhere with it. You have a license to carry, but you can't do nothing with it. The law stopped me from going to a state like New Jersey, where I was arrested, that was not even 5 minutes away from Center City. You can end up in Trenton or Camden. I couldn't go across the bridge with my license to carry, my permit or my firearm. So the law failed me a lot because basically, I don't know what the law was put there for, but my driver's license has reciprocity with every state. I can go in any state with my driver's license, you can too, and I have my license to conceal to carry, and I can't go in every state.
What do you think are the biggest obstacles in terms of solving these problems, finding the solutions?
Well, I think it would be trying to get Congress to move on these issues. It's almost like, we don't have a clear pathway to citizenship because no one wants to address maybe our immigration law. And what we're hearing now is build a wall. And build a wall is not going to address a pathway to citizenship. So I think we need a Congress that is going to have to look at these issues and come up with some meaningful legislation as it relates to gun safety reform measures.
A lot of times, you see on the news somebody locked up with a gun. That person could be a good person who goes to work every day, who just didn't have the knowledge to know to go downtown, get this permit. So by them not doing that, or they might have plans to do it, they didn't get a chance to do it. But in the meantime, while you waiting to go get a permit or learning about a permit, you got to carry a gun to make sure you get home at night safe. And then sometimes you get caught up in the mix. You know what I mean? And another thing about lack of education, we heard a young lady speak today, a sister speak about, not knowing the laws and not knowing she can cross the bridge and stuff like that. And she had her gun. And her story got media coverage. Imagine the people that's sitting in jail right now for the same thing. You know what I'm saying? Who don't know how to call the media, who won't meet the prostitute who gives her a good lawyer to help out. They rotting away.
I think to address gun violence, it just can't be legislated as a policymaker. There has to be a holistic approach to addressing gun violence. I think the church needs to get involved more often. I think community organizations need to be involved. I think there's all kinds of organizations and communities that could look at what's going on in their neighborhood and maybe come up with some strategies and some solution to curb gun violence.
Basically, it's a program called Boxing Out Negativity, and it started on 16th and Avers in front of the school, William Penn School, which is 1616 South Avers. And one day I was sitting outside watching a group of kids throwing rocks at cars and busting car windows out, and just looking at myself in the mirror, which was looking at them, and just sink my cycle of violence that played in my days. Something as innocent as throwing rocks at cars can lead to death, just like it led in my days. So I wanted to be a part of the change and stop that cycle of violence that played into our community.
In your opinion, how is that more effective than, say, lawmakers making laws?
In my opinion, that Boxing Out Negativity program is effective because It's a grassroots organization. Just like, you know, not taking nothing away from the police, but here it's a 24-hour job for me. It's not a 9 to 5. So community organization built in the community. So once my 9 to 5 clock out, I still see the same children in the community, and I'm well known. The relationship I build inside the community with the children, with the schools, with the programs that's going on in the community. So
Do you work with the schools?
yes, I do. Well, basically, I started outside in front of the school, and the principal of the school invited me to come in and do some help in the inside. So once I got inside the school went from a level 6. Level 6 inside of CPS is the highest of aggression. So they went from a level 6 to a level 1. Police was going back and forth to school. Kids were constantly getting suspended. So they went to like 300 plus suspension till 15 suspension in 1 year. So it was amazing.
With your organization?
With the help of my organization. I wouldn't take the full blame, but they put 90% of the blame on the boxing program.
Action Youth is a nonprofit in the city of Denver that's dedicated to developing urban student leaders who positively influence their community. And we do that by teaching the value of healthy life choices, academic excellence, and leading to serve in their community. I think for Action Youth, we really focus on healthy life choices. So we're trying to help kids figure out what are the root symptoms within their families, the generational symptoms that are going on, family after family. You know, grandfathers hooked on alcohol, and then the parents are hooked on alcohol, and then the kids are starting to get connected with that substance. And so we're trying to help kids identify those root causes to those issues. Alcohol is just one example, but it could be a systemic issue of anger within the family, passed down from generation to generation. But what are the root causes of that? And so trying to help kids also grasp a vision for their life, a plan, a future in a healthy way, to understand their strengths and their weaknesses, to know that they're not insignificant in this community, that they can contribute to society, and that they do have some strengths that can benefit society.
You know, there's a lot of ways that we do it, you know, but basically what we want kids to understand is that their life is a value. There's something, a value of their life. They can be whatever they want to be, so we give them some hope so they can think about life a different way, because right now a lot of these young kids, they're out here, they don't care about themselves, and they don't respect others. So there's a lot of violence in our city. So one youth at a time, we change their thinking about themselves, believe in themselves, build confidence in themselves, and save their lives that way.
People are certain ways because of past experiences, and people resolve issues and conflicts a certain way because of their baseline, and because of how they're taught and how they see others resolve those situations. So I think it's, for the most part, I think violence is a learned behavior.
So it goes back to culture.
It goes back to upbringing. It goes back to culture. It goes back to education. It goes back to how you go ahead and how you are taught as a child to deal with things. You know, my mother made it a point to say, you respect people, you talk to people, you say, excuse me, please, thank you. Somebody bumps into you, you don't automatically, you assume positive intent, right? But again, you have multiple generations that were never parented, that have no conflict resolution skills, that the only thing that they see is the violence that's perpetuated in the media, and that for them, because they were raised by the TV, at least I was raised through Sesame Street and the Electric Company, I remember those shows, you know, and so, I mean, you know, and I don't blame so much the gun, just like I don't blame the person, I blame society. We failed multiple generations, and shame on us. And the focus now needs to be not on the gun, needs to be on the root causes of that violence. You know, let's not go ahead and do sleight of hand. Let's go ahead and talk about it the way it really is.
So do you think that the government has a lot to do with how inner city and urban environments and urban culture views gun ownership?
Absolutely. It's a damn near 4 or 5 way Venn diagram. And the hood always intersects. Government, big business, media, all of those different things are specifically designed to make sure that black and white people and anybody of any race that's in an urban demographic is very controlled by the legislation that does not make them firearm friendly. You know, all of the places that have all of the gun control laws, all of the gun legislation, you know, it's 600 murders. It's, you know, I'm paraphrasing on that part, but it's not an accident. Anything that's that systematic, it's a highly organized phenomenon. It's not a oops. The sun is in the same position every day until it's gone. That's a highly organized phenomenon. Every area that we go to, places that I'm from, with people that think like me, every area got all of the same gun control, gun restrictions. This, you got to get this, you got to do that. And those are all high crime areas, high prison population areas. It's not an accident. They are actively doing this to try to circumvent this Constitution, especially in urban demographics, because it's a lot of people there. It's not about gun control, it's about people control. It's cultural, racial, it's manipulative, and it's all back to control. All gun control laws, it's racist in its roots of, I'll give you the whole breakdown. It's racist in its roots of all gun control laws come from after people of African descent in America were emancipated. Sidebar, emancipate just means change of ownership. It does not mean free. Now, we just were beating the hell out of these people for however many hundred years. Now they are citizens. That have access to all of the same rights that we do. Now make gun control laws. That's the origin of all gun control laws in this country. It's a great book called Negroes and the Gun that everybody should read. Now, after that, over time, you know, white males, middle-aged males, firearm, and they have that right to. Now what's happening is the people that initially just wanted control to control people of color, natives to this land, African descendants, Caribbean people, you know, all of these different people. Now that power isn't enough. Now they want to expand that into all American citizens. And some of those Second Amendment guys that are my white homies, they go, yo, and they see it. Now, I've been telling them for however long, they're coming for yours too. They're just trying to slowly use the urban demographic and keep us separate to make it seem as if, you know, oh, it's only for those crazy people over there. I'm one of them people that would be crazy over there. So then when they had that conversation with me, they go, yo, you're actually cool. Yeah, because you were misinformed by that same media. That's the second part. Where it becomes cultural is because the media repeats it over and over and over and over again. So it conditions people that are watching different channels a certain way. Don't go over there, those people are crazy. Don't go over there, those white guys are racist. It's game. When it's really 1% of the population that's just playing a sick divide and conquer game on the American public to maintain an overwhelming share of resources. If this thing goes the way that it's going, you have more equality. So instead of you guys having $8 trillion, now you got to share $4 trillion with the rest of us. That's really what they're trying to keep everybody divided and conquered for. And the reason why it's based in firearm first or primarily is because that's the only way that you can defend yourself and your other rights. A person that cannot defend their rights has none. If I show up with the burner and you don't, I win. You lose. Easy. You know, so it's a holistic approach to, you know, convince people that, one, people like me from the hood is crazy over there, and then at the same time encroach on your rights while they was tricking you about me. It's what I call a beautiful ugly. It's something that's so beautiful in its precision, but your intent is so fucking ugly.
This group is mostly really strong people about the gun, about 2A. So certain things trigger things, like when they hear mandatory, they start. I understand that's your world, but a lot of the people that's in that world ain't in the jungle either. So when you're not in the jungle, you know what I mean, and you're not seeing the things you're seeing. Like I had a meeting the other day where we were talking about funerals, and I told people at my age, as young as I am, the amount of funerals I've had to pay for and go to and stuff like that, most people couldn't even fathom how crazy that is. Where it's become, we've been desensitized, where it's become almost regular. You know, it's sad that if I see on Instagram somebody from my neighborhood say RIP to somebody else, it's definitely a different feeling, I'm sure, than my man over here. You know what I'm saying? Like it's more of a tragedy for him because it's like, holy fuck, somebody got. But we kind of like, damn, and then it's like, we out, let's go get something to eat or whatever. You know what I mean?
Tone Trump brings up an amazing point. One of the biggest difficulties I've had in editing this video is that I'm interviewing people from two completely different worlds. It seems that people in the pro-gun community and anti-gun community live in a completely different America than those who live in the inner cities.
Are you really safer with a gun? Now, as soon as I say, you know, ask people, do you really think you're safer with a gun? My opponents will right away say, see, he's trying to take the guns away. No, there's nothing wrong with talking about and having the individual question if they should have a gun and if they're really safer. Because your studies have shown that you're clearly much less safe if you have a gun in your home. That gun is 24 times more likely to kill someone that you know rather than kill an intruder. So I think, questioning somebody. Now, a rancher out on the plains, I don't doubt that they want to be armed, and I don't blame them. But especially in a metropolitan setting, I think you say to people, really question yourself if you're safer with that gun. When you put in the equation chances of accident, kids look for things. They don't listen to you when you say stay out of something, or in the case of suicides or domestic violence. When you look at domestic violence cases, you probably find that in many cases the guns that were used in domestic violence were purchased for protection.
We tell people that there's no way you can be a responsible gun owner in the inner city. You're either a cop or you're a scumbag. You're a bad person for carrying a gun. Is that something that you see in the inner cities?
No. There's good and bad in all races and all people. So I would not say that I think that you can be black, Hispanic, whatever race you are, and white, and still be a responsible gun owner.
So how do we get to the core problems and solve those core problems, like the generational issues and systemic issues?
Right. And I think that's where you look at conflict management. What can we do to teach people how to resolve conflict without violence? I think that, when you look at what's on TV these days and what's in our movies, theaters, those kinds of things, there's just a high tolerance for violence. And then what happens is sometimes people don't know how to handle their anger. And if they have a gun, they may go back from that club, go to their car to get a gun, and then re-enter in that club because of a conflict. I think it's important that we teach our young kids all the way up to high school good conflict resolution strategies so that you can handle yourself through words versus through violence.
Nobody in the gun violence movement who's trying to ban guns is talking about the media, the influence the media has, the stereotypes that the media places on our culture, the influence that these hip hop artists, MTV, movie stars, all these people have on kids in our community. You listen to some of the music from back in the day, and hip hop was all about community and restoring community and all that kind of stuff. And then it shifted into having to sell drugs to make a living. Then it shifted into now I do drugs and this is the cool thing. And if you mess with me, I have guns and your team has guns and we could get it on. And so it's what kind of perception is it showing when I'm working with kids that are in 3rd and 4th grade and they're listening to a Brother Lynch song who's talking about leaving horse heads in people's beds, and this is like a 3rd grader and who wouldn't know anything else. And I know this for a fact because my own kids I didn't raise them around that stuff. And they didn't even understand or know who Beyonce was, for example. And she's not bad, completely bad, but I don't necessarily agree with all the messages she pushes out to the community. But my point is kids only know what they're taught. And if all they're saying in 3rd grade is I'm working with these kids and I ask them what they want to be when they grow up and they say I want to be a gangster, well, they're only going to know that if they've seen it. And the kid that shared that with me, his brother was a thug, his uncles were all, you talked about GKIs and Incas and all that. You're talking about gangs that have generations of gang members. The grandpa's a gang member, It's crazy in those environments, but they don't see the destructive nature of it within their family because that's normal to them. It's hard to put it on one because I feel like they're all kind of intermingled with each other. So at one point you have the family turning these kids onto some of this media ahead of time. I remember me growing up being 6 years old after my parents partied all night and they were passed out all day. Well, guess what? I'm up kind of rummaging through all the mess and I'm listening to NWA at 6 years old. you know, because that's what was there. And I'm like, what is this? What is that? Two Life Crew, listening to that kind of stuff. And so that kind of stuff is influencing me, but the family's not really managing it. Well, the difference with my kids is I was really, really intentional. I also, growing up, had a lot of freedom. So when I had my kids, I knew that, okay, it's time for me to really focus on helping them become the men and the women that like would be productive in society, which meant sacrificing some of the fun things I wanted to do.
I think it's putting the neighbor back in the hood. I think as a community, I think neighbors need to look out for one another, look out for the kids that are out there. Because when I was growing up, if I was a couple blocks away from my house, some neighbors knew who my parents were, and they would be like, "Hey, we'll get back to the other side. It's already late. Whatever it is." Now everyone kind of stays to themselves, don't want to get involved, and these kids are just running around on their own. Putting the neighbor back in the hood and giving young people a chance to, build some hope in some of these young people.
My job primarily, I work with the kids on the streets. The kids that's out on the corners, that's usually hustling, the gang bangers, they're my primary targets.
Okay.
Because I too was one of those kids. I was in prison 27 years. And I come from this community, the Austin community. I was raised here. Okay, I was such a part of the destruction of my community, whereas today my fight is the reconstruction. I fight to bring the neighbor back into the hood, because everywhere in America, we the only people with hoods. Everyone else has a neighborhood. And my fight is to bring the neighbor back into the hood, so therefore we can be caring people, caring about ourselves, caring about our neighbors, caring about our neighbors' property, and to help these kids instill some type of structure and discipline in them. And basically just to change the mindset. And I believe my presence make a big difference in this particular community here, because this is my roots. My roots is in this community. And my passion is overwhelming when it comes to this community. And I think it shows.
Do you think that's more effective than the government being involved?
Yes, I know it is. Because even with the altercation today, it was police here, and that didn't stop it. But immediately when I was made myself present known, I was able to get 4 or 5 of kids where they was trying to wrestle with one. And just my presence, and they listened, and they moved when I was asking them to move. Now that don't happen all the time, but it happens more times than not.
I was lucky enough to witness this, not because I witnessed a young man being arrested, but because I seen the type of power the community has, a type of power that government and police will never have.
Segregation was made early on, and with the Robert Taylor homes, and then even with those projects coming down and individuals being segregated to certain areas of the city, I mean, you're gonna have a group of people who live together, and if they're not given the same resources, I mean, it can be black, brown, orange, purple, pink, it don't matter. If they're not given the right resources to be able to succeed, you're gonna have people who are gonna wind up, wild out.
Yeah.
It's more people being pushed towards this area. At first, it was nothing but us that grown up. Now it's more people pushed in towards us.
It's like they boxing us in.
Boxing us in.
You know,
Cabrini Greens, all the projects, everybody coming here now. And it's hell to tell the captain, because we ain't going nowhere. I've been around here 38 years. I've been shot 9 times through this area, I'm still around here.
Growing up in this neighborhood, what contribute to the violence were the resources. The resources are limited. A poor community which made a hostile environment. And the only fun and the only resources that a kid like myself had was to join a gang. We couldn't go out and say, I want to join the Boys Club or the Boy Scout, because there were none in the community. So quite naturally, I joined the next thing was close to me, which were the gangs and the guys on the corners.
The conditions of my community, and we are poverty. And see, my thinking is, poverty is the root of the problem in our community. We don't control the economics in our community. Everyone in our community that controls the economics are other people that look like other people, that don't look like me. So when I woke up in the mornings and go to the grocery stores, I saw somebody else running grocery stores. So my hopes and aspirations wasn't as high as I would have saw somebody that looked like me, where I could look at me owning my own stuff. So what I did was I went the other way. That was a choice I made. Now don't get me wrong, because it's people that grew up in my community when I grew up that didn't take the route that I took.
Poverty. A gun is equated with power, and a power is equated with money. So when you got people that's poor and struggling, and you know, we live in a world now. I'll give you a perfect example with social media. You can go on social media every day and see everything you're technically supposed to have. If you're a young person, you're supposed to have these sneakers, you're supposed to have this shirt, you're supposed to have this, and if you don't have these things, you're not cool. And when you're growing up, it comes a point in a person's life where you're willing to do certain things to get those things. And a lot of those things that you're willing to do usually become, you have to do something illegal, unfortunately. And when you're involved in an illegal lifestyle, you live a life where you gotta look over your shoulder constantly. So the first thing you gotta think is protecting yourself.
I mean, it's not just Chicago, you know, there's other cities who are facing similar struggles, Baltimore, Detroit, Philadelphia, a lot of these cities across the nation. It's a social economic issue. There's a lot of these communities that don't have the same sort of, you know, opportunities that other communities have. There's no jobs in a lot of these communities, so a lot of these people resort to drugs to make money, to be able to eat. You know, there's food deserts, so there's nowhere to get food, healthy eating. So these kids, they resort to, you know, be down the street and be able to fend for themselves that way. And I mean, once we get the socio-economic sort of situation in order and giving young people a chance to make some money, to be able to afford a decent living, I mean, you're always going to have individuals resorting to another way to make money.
I grew up in the Bronx, with a single parent that worked every single day. My mother was occasionally on welfare growing up. I remember those times really, really vividly. But as soon as she could get off of welfare, she was immediately off and working. And she worked most of her life, if not all of her life, to send me through high school and through college. So I don't necessarily buy that because you're in a subset of socioeconomic class, you absolutely have to resort to using a firearm. I don't buy that mentality. Because I grew up in the Bronx and I grew up around walking and seeing the result of people being shot, walking over bodies that were bleeding. You know, that wasn't the norm, but it wasn't an exception either. It happened. You know, you would hear gunshots. That didn't make me run out and go and get a gun. Now, interestingly enough, my mother actually did have a gun somehow. I don't know how the heck she had it, but she had it in New York. You know, raising a single child. So, my point, I guess, is if people have no choice and no options to protect themselves, either because of ignorance, they don't know that they have options to protect themselves, like they can apply and get a license to carry, or let's say because the city or the state doesn't have the courtesy to actually clarify with them and say, hey, even if you had some kind of run-ins with the law, doesn't necessarily mean that you're unable to get a license to carry. If individuals are marginalized and pushed to a position where they have to make a choice either to protect themselves illegally or die, I know what choice I would make. Right. So, you know, I'm not trying to make excuses for anybody, but it's much deeper than, you know, these little brown people carry guns because they're in a marginalized area.
It's not a government given right, it's a constitutional right that we exercise, but it's a human right. Every human, you know, when they are born, has the right to defend their existence. You know, and it's marketed different in urban demographics. It's told like, oh, well, that firearm isn't really for you. So what we do is we go and inform people in certain demographics about the information that they just were missing, or expose how it's been marketed differently to them on purpose. It's not an accident. It's not a mistake. You know, there's a reason why accounting isn't taught in urban demographics, because you don't want that large amount of people to actually be financially responsible. It's not good for most people's businesses. You know, so it's the same thing with firearms. You know, it's presented in the hood where it's like, you got to be the police officer or you're the bad guy if you have a firearm. There's no way that you could be a good, upstanding citizen. And that's the myth and the misinformation that we, you know, as an organization, work every single day to dispel.
I disagree with my man in there. My man, I think his name was Rob, who I really like a lot. He didn't feel like it was a systematic thing. I definitely feel like it's a systematic thing. I definitely feel like it's intentional.
We've heard members of several communities give their opinions about issues surrounding gun violence. When I asked them what the NRA and Mayor Bloomberg have done to curb that gun violence, here's what they said.
Yeah, you know what? They have to just put the money where their mouth is, man. I mean, if they think that guns are safe, well, then come out here and let's figure out why there's so many kids out here killing each other. You know, I mean, they got enough money to back their, you know, their candidates they want to back during campaign runs, and they got money to do all these sort of super PACs and all that. Invest some of that money to programs like us that are on the streets working with these kids, trying to save their lives. I mean, until you're out here, you know, seeing the tears, seeing the bloodshed, you're not going to know, you know, what the reality of what guns are doing out here, you know?
Okay.
So until they come out here with some of the resources and see what's going on, I don't think we want to hear what they have to say.
I don't think any of the kids in my neighborhood even know who they are, to be honest.
Yeah.
They don't. If you asked them what NRA meant, they probably wouldn't even be able to tell you.
Do you think the NRA and Bloomberg or your organizations like yourself, RMGO, that type of stuff, do you think they've done a good enough job to go into where it is a daily occurrence? Do you think there could be more? Do you think they've done enough?
Oh no, clearly not. You know, the two sides aren't really talking to each other. We're at polar opposites on this issue, and there doesn't seem to be any in between. While again, most Americans are there in between. You know, my side feels that we're closer to what, you know, the average person feels, and I would imagine that my opponents would say the same thing.
So, how do we change that? How do we get the two sides to come together and talk about the real issues?
You know, it's difficult, and unfortunately, I think it's not gonna be until we have such a terrible occurrence or series of occurrences that it's going to happen.
Do you think the 2A and anti-gun community, both sides, do you think they've done a good enough job in the inner cities to help with?
No, because I have a problem with both, because I feel like a lot of the 2A community are not coming to the community, and a lot of the non-2A community are super unrealistic. It's like these people want me to go into the schools. They want me to go and tell people to put their guns down, right? But then I look in the paper and I'm seeing all these teenagers getting killed. So I can't tell this young boy to put no gun down, and he got to worry about this other kid coming to blow his fucking head off. So we got to somehow meet in the middle. We got to meet in the middle, because y'all want me to just run around with this agenda. You know, stop gun violence. No, put the guns down. Nah, man, I'm not convinced that putting the gun down is going to stop the gun violence. I'm not convinced of it. Now, do I feel like the gun community could be a little more sensitive with certain things and be more informative? Sure. But I'm not about to sit here and say, create this law now where you got to wait 6 months to get your firearm. Nah, I'm not for that either. So I'm kind of like, I'm one of the people that's kind of like in the middle. You get what I'm saying? Like, because I'm not for what they're talking about, and I'm not for what, you know, with the two. I don't know enough from either, but I just know that I have a politician in Philly who was trying to work hand in hand with me, and she has a sensitive situation where she wanted them to, you know, she's anti-gun. She's anti-gun, and she called me and she cried. She lost her child to gun violence.
Why did you get involved with ceasefire? How did that go about?
Well, it was really from the death of my son at Columbine High School. It was just 2 weeks before the tragedy at Columbine that at the dinner table, out of the clear blue sky, my son Daniel asked me a question. And it was something he had heard in just conversation with other members of the debate team at Columbine High School. He said, "Dad, did you know there were loopholes in the Brady Bill?" 2 weeks later, he was killed with a gun that was purchased through a loophole in the Brady Bill.
And I understand her pain, but I also gave her examples of people I know who are still alive because they did have their firearm. You know what I mean? So it's a catch-22, but I'm not in no position. I'm here because I believe in being able to the right to protect yourself. So on that part of it, you know what I mean, I'm all for it. I don't want to see anything affect somebody, a good person, being able to protect themselves. Your cameraman shouldn't have to prescribe to a law that some outlaw is not going to prescribe to anyway.
But no, there's no one thing that's going to solve this problem. We have to look at a whole variety of things, and being tougher on those who use guns improperly is part of that puzzle. But you know, speaking from a personal level, where it's especially difficult for me to work with the NRA, is the fact that 2 months after the tragedy of Columbine, I wrote a letter to the NRA, to Charlton Heston, the president of the NRA, expressing concerns. Sent that letter by that fall of '99, hadn't gotten a response, so I called NRA headquarters on three different occasions, told them clearly who I was, and said, can I expect a response to the letter? And I was told every time, yes, you can expect a response. Yeah, there's delays, he has a busy schedule, you'll get a response. I never got a response. In March of 2000, when I met Wayne LaPierre, I handed him an envelope that included the letter to Mr. Heston and a letter to Mr. LaPierre saying, I sent this letter, I was told I'd get a response, I never have. Would you please see to it that I get a response? I never got a response. I heard from someone who said they were working public relations for the NRA and asked for a copy of the letter so they could respond. They never responded. I then, on 2 occasions, I forget what years these were, this was a year or 2 afterwards, I went to the NRA headquarters and said, I'm here to get a response to my letter. I hope somebody will be willing to speak to me. You can find me outside, I'll be marching. So I marched out on the sidewalk. When I got no response, I marched onto the property, and on both occasions I was arrested for trespassing. So rather than talk to me in any way, acknowledge me in any way, they had me arrested.
Poverty, poor schools, systemic issues, family issues, racial and class divide. It seems like there are many issues surrounding gun violence. The question is, which comes first? The violence or the poverty? The violence or the failing schools? The violence or the systemic issues? I began this journey over a year ago without any film experience, some of you may have noticed, but my desire was to spark a conversation about the real issues surrounding gun violence. I don't claim to have found the solution, nor do I believe I was able to cover everything. My only wish is that we finally stop the rhetoric, stop simply talking, and begin the action. Oh, and before I go, one more thing to talk about. This is often a taboo and something we don't like to talk about, especially in the gun community. However, in my opinion, this is one of the most important things to talk about.
It actually affects them in many ways. When you think about what we're talking about of trauma and with gun violence, if you reference Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, what is being disrupted is the second foundationary level. Okay, so if you know anything about the hierarchy of human needs, what drives a human at their base is survival: air, food, water. If that's the first thing that we try to get. If that's taken care of, we move on to our next need, which is safety and security. So when you're talking about being witness to or nearby any kind of violence, something that is causing death, that level of safety and security is being disrupted. So it is as impactful as if you were to deny someone, at that next level, air, food, or water. It is really just foundational. When that is disrupted, the rest of the levels of human needs can't even be addressed. Your sense of belonging and purpose and community, your sense of self-esteem, your ability to self-actualize, to be productive, all of that is disrupted. And so when you have someone who's traumatized, and that's just on the basic psychological level, you also have very real physical consequences. You have people suffering from adrenal fatigue because their fight or flight is, on all the time. They just get stuck in that state of, hyper alertness. And what happens is with that adrenaline can't be shut off, you're flooding your system with poison. People have memory deficits. They develop heart disease. They have strokes and everything because of the dumping of adrenaline and the inability to resolve it. What happens is if that there's something lurking over you. The neighbor down the street might get mad at me and go get their gun and shoot me. Now, I'm going to be paying attention to that more than anything else, and I'm going to try to get that safety need met. Now, what do I do against a gun? I go get a gun. That's really, there's nothing else to really protect me on that really basic instinctual level from gun violence unless my gun is bigger. So that, perpetuates absolutely that kind of behavior. And it's a very real threat. We have had, I've had many clients come to me with unresolved trauma from being shot at, having their family members shot, and it leaves them in a state. And first of all, trauma is like the number one cause of addiction. We find that 85 to 90% of people with addiction disorder have co-occurring PTSD. So it's very, very common. You also will find, things like depression and anxiety that accompany addiction as well. But most often you will find a history of either experienced or witnessed trauma that somebody's trying to numb themselves to that went unresolved. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody who experiences trauma will develop PTSD or addiction, but that is the number one cause.
I met with one of the parents of one of the victims, Tom Mauser. His child died at Columbine.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a state representative, one of the Nevilles, who was at Columbine. They go in two different paths.
Mm-hmm.
So psychologically, how could you explain that? How does the one situation lead to two different outcomes?
It's again about the processing of that level of security. And it depends on how diversified that level of security is. So if you have an individual whose security is based upon their physical well-being, their survival, their lived experience, if you attack that, the chances that they are going to recover are going to be significantly decreased. If you have somebody who has a diversified sense of security and safety, so it's not just about whether or not I'm physically safe. Do I have a sense of emotional and psychological security? Do I have a sense of spiritual security? A lot of times you'll find that people who have devout faith will process events like these a lot easier because their sense of security is outside of their physical well-being and whether or not they're traumatized. They have a connection to something else. Now, again, whether it's spiritual, whether it's psychological, whether it's emotional, it could be mystic, but whatever allows them to feel safe, as long as they have another place to put that, the chances that they will recover and be able to rebuild are increased.
Do you think there is a lack of resources when it comes to this type of counseling in the inner city?
There's definitely a lack of resources. There's not a lot of profit in mental health. So even when I was working for the for-profits, a lot of times you had families that were paying exorbitant fees out of pocket because the insurance wasn't covering it. So you also, in the inner cities, one of the things that we really lack is the availability for residential treatment. You can get, like a basic, if you can get scheduled, you can get a psychiatric evaluation, mental health treatment, and then, continued outpatient treatment maybe once a week, and the therapist is going to have to continually justify you coming to see them. Whereas what we really find with these kinds of situations, they're very acute. Sometimes people will need a residential stay. Sometimes they will need inpatient treatment. Sometimes they'll need, medications. I mean, they're doing things now with ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, to reset brain waves and everything. These things are not available in the inner cities. Mm-hmm.
So how can we encourage those who maybe potentially still want to defend themselves with a firearm, or those who are just playing, let's just set the firearm aside.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just talk mental health. So how can we encourage people, especially in the inner cities, to get that proper healing? So how can we promote that more?
Well, to talk about it openly, especially people who do have mental health issues. In my experience, there are very few people who do not have some kind of mental illness. It is just the same as anything else. I mean, very few people go through their entire lives without experiencing a physical illness. Very few people go through life without experiencing a mental illness. So I think just talking about it openly, so we can just be realistic about things rather than taking an emotional side of it's good or bad or right or wrong. Just say it exists and this is what it is. And I think that is a conversation that isn't happening around gun ownership and gun violence as well, as you were saying. Everybody wants to, talk about laws and rights and things like that. But when you think about the advent of the gun and what it meant, prior to that, people were battling in physical means, hand to hand. Guns, were developed kind of as, the great equalizer, right? So now, you can't just come in and overpower me, because if I have a gun, I can now defend myself against you. You won't necessarily win. However, it's a very, very final solution to our conflict if I shoot you, So not only does that mean something for you, that now means something for me. Like, you and I are going to go hand to hand. Chances are you're going to kick my ass. You're bigger than me, That's probably how it's going to end up. Is that going to be traumatizing on some level for both of us? Absolutely. Absolutely. Would it be, is it, some people consider it unfair because you're so bigger, much bigger than me? Sure. But now when we bring weapons into it, now when especially a gun, now I shoot you, I win, you're dead. Now there's a whole different level of trauma that I'm experiencing, that guys your size are experiencing, that the community is experiencing. So I think just having a real conversation about the finality of utilizing a gun for protection. It just takes us into a whole different psychological realm, and I don't think that that's being talked about enough. When, somebody says, oh, I'll get a gun for defense, or, this is what I'm going to do. It changes you when you become willing, as somebody, again, who has experienced suicidal and homicidal ideation, it changes you when you become willing to end a life, whether it be your own or somebody else's. It's just it's a different level experience. And I think maybe we should have some more conversations about that.
Has the NRA led a big push? Has Mayor Bloomberg led a big push for?
No, I don't think that there has been any complete discussions around it. That's my experience. That's what I'm perceiving anyway, is that there haven't been enough complete discussions about this issue, about the aftermath, about, again, just the potentiating. I mean, who talks to anybody about that? As I'm thinking about buying a gun. Okay, have you thought about, so what has brought you there? What has brought you there in your emotional and psychological state, where you obviously feel that your level of safety isn't strong enough, where you need to have a gun to protect yourself? Why are you feeling like that? I'm not saying you shouldn't get the gun, but what's going on where you're feeling you need that specific level of protection? And when would you see yourself using this? Are you, let's walk through that. Okay, somebody comes into your home and they're robbing you or whatever. You bring out your gun. What's going through your head? What would motivate you to pull the trigger? Would it be, think about your level of fear. Think about your level of anxiety. Would that make you feel more secure? How would you deal with the fact that you killed someone, that you took another life? All of those kinds of things. These are very intense psychological conversations that aren't happening. They're just not. They happen in counselors' offices, typically after the fact, or when we're doing risk assessments where, you know, we are often doing risk assessments where we talk about suicidal and homicidal ideation. And this is the kind of conversations that we have. So again, like if you're considering having a gun for, you know, your own protection, we might want to have a conversation. Have you ever had suicidal thoughts? Have you ever had homicidal thoughts? Let's explore that and just make sure not, again, here I go between the clinical and the you know, political citizen. Not necessarily so I can decide whether or not you can have a gun, but so that you can decide whether or not you should own a gun.
Do you think gun violence, and it's hard to say, so we're just speculating, and maybe you do have an answer for it, but do you think that gun violence can be reduced? Not with laws, but can be reduced, say, if especially in the inner city. And I focus on the inner city, not to turn this into a class warfare or anything like that, but that's
where it happens.
That's
yeah.
where most of this happens. Do you think counseling could prevent future gun violence?
Absolutely, it can, and it has in the past. You've had a lot of inner city individuals who have come up, and what they've done is that they've faced down the fear of that finality, you know, where they no longer feel that they need to defend themselves against that attack, and they walk into it and they say, what are you doing? And they start having those kinds of conversations with people. So yeah, you're saying you're gonna go kill this person. Okay, now they're dead, now what?
This is real life, little home, that's why I stayed down. I done came up off that boy, look what I made now. Like Nike, I just do this ain't a game now. I try to get a job, but they turn me down. I know life ain't fair, that's why I don't play around. I know these niggas scap as hell, that's why I'm go around. I know these bitches very well, they ain't gon' hold you down. So I'm out here on my lonely, getting money now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ain't no stopping now. I got guap now. Since I've been out, I'm on the top now. Rock star now, I can't turn down, I can't turn down. I chose the life I'm living, out here trapping, getting it, turning work to business. Always been terrific, I tried to get a job, but I didn't get it, so I'm out here getting it. I chose the life I'm living, gold balls, bad balls, I chose the life I'm living. Cold bonds with the rocks, I chose the life I'm living. Born fast cars, I chose the life I'm living. I chose the life I'm living. I chose the life I'm living. I have no patience cause the time that I miss. Ain't no time for no games, no fuck arounds, I gotta get it. My mama need me, my nephews, my little sisters. So I'm jugging like your scooter. Man, I'm getting to that moolah. If you're in the way, you better move. Cause I'm killing niggas so cruel. And I'm crying pussy like food. I don't sleep, no snooze. Cause I'm trying to win, not lose. Vacations on cruise. It take patience, I know. Down south, me and my bros, they go wherever I go. They're strapped to every show. My fam, I do this for. My life was on hold. Now my life back on gold. Cause this the life I chose. Cause this the life I chose. Cause this the life I chose. I chose the life I'm living. Out here trapping, getting it. Turning work to Benji. Always been terrific. I tried to get a job, but I didn't get it. So I'm out here getting it. I chose the life I'm living. Gold balls, bad moms. I chose the life I'm living. Cold bonds with the rocks. I chose the life I'm living. Born fast cars. I chose the life I'm living. I chose the life I'm living. I chose the life I'm living.